Nick Skrip here, NFL content lead for Fantrax, talking quarterback sleepers for 2024. I'll define what I mean by a sleeper, and then I'll talk about four guys that I like to beat what they are currently being drafted as and be valuable in fantasy football lineups for this coming season. Let's get it. Talking quarterback sleepers for 2024. And whenever you talk about a term in fantasy football, it's important to define what you mean by that. When somebody says breakout, when somebody says sleeper, bust, I think that's a different definition from analyst to analyst. So I'll define what I mean by sleeper, and that's a player whose value and average draft position, so ADP, is considerably lower than what their fantasy production can be. And for the quarterback position, to give a couple examples from last year, Jordan Love was drafted as the quarterback 26. That was his ADP. He finished as the quarterback 5. Good example of a sleeper last year. Jared Goff, QB 17. He finished QB 7. Baker Mayfield's a really nice example. Quarterback 31 for his ADP, but he finished quarterback 10. CJ Stroud, quarterback 24 for redraft leagues, finished as the quarterback 11. I have a couple guys I want to talk to you guys about today that I feel like could be a value at their current cost, at their ADP, that can benefit fantasy football lineups. First guy on the list here, Kirk Cousins, now an Atlanta Falcon. Cousins was putting up some of the biggest numbers of his career, weeks 1 through 8, before his Achilles tear. During this span, Cousins ranked number 2 in passing yards. He was tied for number 1 in passing touchdowns. He was number 6 in total fantasy points, and he was number 8 in fantasy points per game. He actually averaged 19.4 fantasy points per game weeks 1 through 8 last season. He was on fire statistically and for fantasy football, which truly shows that he has some juice left, even after that Achilles tear at 35.9 years old. Prior to 2023, Cousins' resume, 7 seasons over 500 passing attempts with a high of 606. 7 seasons over 4,000 passing yards with a high of 4,917 back in 2016. 3 seasons over 30 passing touchdowns with a high of 35 in 2020. 6 seasons averaging over 18 fantasy points per game with a high of 20 in 2020. 6 seasons averaging top 12 fantasy points per game with a high finish at number 6 in both 2017 and 2016 in points per game for the position. The bullets above demonstrate passing upside for Kirk Cousins. That translated well for fantasy football. He signed a 4-year, $180 million contract with the Falcons this offseason. Minnesota featured a great trio of Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, and TJ Hawkinson, but it's a good pivot over to a young core of former first-rounders in Drake London, Kyle Pitts, and Bijan Robinson. You even have a field stretcher in Darnell Mooney and a reliable outlet in Rondale Moore potentially. The history of both statistical and fantasy production tied to now a young core. It's exciting for fantasy football. Cousins finishing as a top 12 fantasy quarterback in 2024 is not out of the realm of possibilities, but I think his average draft position is fairly low right now, maybe due to the injury, maybe due to his age. He's not, a sexy runner of the football or anything like that, but I think that this Atlanta system, now with the new coaching staff, is going to feature more passing volume to a trio of elite playmakers that we will see in 2024. Next guy on my list, Deshaun Watson. Across the last 3 seasons, Deshaun Watson has played in just 12 total games. Injuries and a suspension are behind the reason why for that. The market seems to view Watson as a quarterback who simply is not good anymore. But last season for me says otherwise, and people won't note that. Watson appeared in 6 games, but he only played in 5 of those because he played 16% of the snaps in one of those 6 games. His numbers look like this in 3 of those games. Week 1, 16 for 29 for 154 passing yards, touchdown, interception, 45 rushing yards, and a rushing touchdown. 21.7 fantasy points as a quarterback 5 for the week. Week 3, 27 for 33 for 289 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns, 16 rushing yards, 21.2 fantasy points as the quarterback 10 for the week. Week 9 at 19 for 30, 219 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns, 22 rushing yards, 19 fantasy points as the quarterback 8 for the week. Joe Flacco's success, to me, is another positive sign for Deshaun Watson. Are those two quarterbacks similar? No, but it does show that, hey, the quarterback can be successful statistically and for fantasy football. Many people forget that there was a stretch when Deshaun Watson was dominant as one of the league's best dual threat quarterbacks. Here are some of the resume pieces through his 3 full seasons, 2018 through 2020. 2 seasons of 4,823 and 4,165 passing yards. Seasons of 444, 413, and 551 rushing yards. 7 rushing touchdowns in 2019, 33 passing touchdowns in 2020, 23.5 fantasy points per game in 2020, ranked 5th, 22 fantasy points per game, ranked 2nd in 2019, and 21.3 fantasy points per game in 2018, ranked 5th. So Watson has statistically shown us upside through the air and on the ground, which we know is a great combination for fantasy football. He's finished as a top 5 quarterback in fantasy points per game in all 3 full seasons. And now you look at the Browns. Amari Cooper finished 2023 with a career high 1,250 receiving yards. David Njoku finished 2023 with career highs in targets, receptions, receiving yards, receiving touchdowns. Jerry Jeudy was acquired from the Broncos, who's a former first-round pick, and he set career highs back in 2022, which was not that long ago. This trio, along with other supporting cast members in Cleveland, is a great boost towards Watson, showing us the success for fantasy football that he did in the past. We're going to go a little bit deeper now. Bryce Young, Carolina Panthers. His rookie season was a disappointment, to say the least. He was the first overall draft pick, but he finished with 2,877 passing yards, 11 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. He was sacked 62 times, 10.4 fantasy points per game, ranked 29th for the position. There was just 2 notable flashes as a rookie. Week 5, he threw for 247 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 20.3 fantasy points, QB9 for the week. Week 16, he threw for 312 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns, 22.2 fantasy points, QB9 again for the week. Young obviously needed to be better. That's plain and simple. But he was set up to fail, in my opinion. He had a poor offensive line, a mediocre set of weapons. The coaching staff ended up getting fired. Carolina made several moves to support him this offseason. Carolina made several moves to support Bryce Young's growth for 2024. The hiring of head coach Dave Canales. Canales has been tied to quarterback improvements in his previous offensive coordinator roles, such as Russell Wilson's 2018 leap in production in Seattle, Geno Smith's major 2022 career turnaround also in Seattle, the bounce back of Baker Mayfield just last season in Tampa Bay. They traded to acquire Deontay Johnson, who should be the team's wide receiver 1. Johnson has earned 144 plus targets in all 3 seasons from 2020 through 2022 as a wide receiver who simply just gets open. And that's what Bryce Young needs. The signing of guards Robert Hunt and Damian Lewis added to the offensive line. Those are now starters. 2024 NFL draft, they added weapons such as Xavier Legette, wide receiver in the first round, Jonathan Brooks, who's the future RB1 in the second round, Jatavian Sanders, who I like via the 4th round, could be the future tight end. So you have improvements to the coaching staff, offensive line, and the weapons. This is what we wanted for Bryce Young this offseason. Now it's on him to step up, but I don't think you typically fluke being the number 1 overall selection of an NFL draft class. I think the guy was very productive in college. I think that his rookie season was rough, but we've seen quarterbacks take a substantial leap forward in their second year. Trevor Lawrence did that when his situation improved, and I see a similar future for Bryce Young. Last guy on my list, Will Levis, who is winning in the offseason in some ways and then had some controversy in some other ways, but we were teased in his first appearance last year in the NFL, his debut as a rookie. He went 19 for 29 for 238 passing yards and 4 passing touchdowns, 26.6 fantasy points, quarterback 6 for the week. Major performance to start his career, but the next 7 appearances meant being outside the top 14 fantasy quarterbacks and outside the top 20 fantasy quarterbacks in 4 of those 7 games. Similar notes, though, to Young, Levis's organization, the Tennessee Titans, made a point to attempt to make his second year successful. Tennessee agreed to terms with Calvin Ridley to pair him with veteran DeAndre Hopkins. Both Ridley and Hopkins earned exactly 136 targets last season. Ridley was a Jaguar, and both wide receivers finished with over 1,000 receiving yards. Tennessee also agreed to terms with Tony Pollard to pair him with 2023 rookie Tyjae Spears. Both running backs finished 2023 with over 50 receptions and over 300 receiving yards. Spears with Derrick Henry last season, who's now gone. Pollard with the Cowboys. Tyler Boyd also agreed to terms with the Titans. Boyd has earned 94 to 147 targets in 4 of his last 5 seasons with the Bengals. J.C. Latham, an offensive tackle out of Alabama, was drafted 7th overall to add to the Titans' offensive line. So Levis enters his sophomore season with a lot of changes, and maybe they aren't the changes of drafting a top 5 wide receiver, but they are changes that are basically telling us, hey, we want to support growth in our quarterback. We're giving him a shot. And I think with the added pieces around him, protection, guys that throw to out of the backfield, guys that throw to in front of him that have a ton of experience, I think Will Levis can be successful in his sophomore season and bring you stream-worthy quarterback weeks for fantasy football. That's all I have for today, though, guys. Make sure you are following and subscribe to all of the Fantrax socials over on Twitter/X, YouTube, Instagram. Tons and tons of content from myself, Nick Skrip, and the rest of the team. Check out the website. We've been plugging a ton of articles this offseason on the NFL Draft Kit, preparing you guys to win championships. Because you know me, if you've been following me, my intention is always to help you guys play to win. Have a nice night.